And then move right into 2.1, discussion for draft priorities for the July 2026 to June 2030 strategic plan. Dr. Richmond.
I'll just
start. Sorry.
Sure. Well, a couple of things. First, as you can see, we've moved the study session to what we hope is a more study-like environment here at a table across from each other where we can actually hash through the issues. So it's a little different than being in the boardroom and having to press down the microphone. We can just speak freely, and so I'm excited about the new venue. And obviously the content, right? The strategic plan really sets kind of the high level priorities for the college. Dr. Richmond's done a great job over the last, at least the year and a half that I've been here, rallying the troops, getting all kinds of input from the community, from stakeholders, obviously from internal folks, from a variety of sources, looking at data to work through the strategic plan. There is a strategic planning team, which she will go into, which you're aware, that kind of leads this effort. But I'm excited because we're getting to a place now where we're starting to see emerging priorities, direction for the college moving forward. And I always think about it as, you know, in the future, what does PCC really want to be good at? You know, what are we going to be great at? What are we going to invest in these areas? And so I'm really looking forward to your feedback and your take on this. Obviously, as the board, this is really where you get to shape the priorities for the institution. As you know, this is Chancellor's goal number 2, is to make sure we have this plan in front of you for June, I believe, by June 30th for your approval. So it's exciting times, I think, for the college moving forward. And so looking forward to the discussion. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Richmond.
Great. Thank you, Chancellor. Taylor, members of the board, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to meet with you all today and give you an overview of the planning process that we have used.
Oh, Nestor. What the clicker to work? Maybe you got to point it to him. He's got the laptop.
Okay, let me go. I'll click instead. That'll be fine. All right, so what I'll do is give you a brief overview of the planning process, so you know how we got to where we are today, and then I'll walk through the 4 draft priorities that have been identified. These are initial discussion point. They've been fairly well vetted, but we need your feedback, your guidance, your insights, so we can see if these directions align with what you're looking for the college, if there is anything missing, or how you'd prioritize across these topics. And so basically we need your input. As mentioned by the Chancellor, we want to bring the final drafts to you in either May or June. And so this is really the key opportunity for the board to help shape this direction and provide us with your feedback. So I want to start with how we went about generating the ideas that led to the priorities that you'll see today. We've had a number of input gathering sessions of different kinds. So we had 2 futures conferences in 2025, both of which include opportunities for community and internal stakeholders to provide their feedback. And then we've had a series of data sessions that we've been holding for a couple of years at the institution. At these, we highlight particular key metrics, and then we have breakout room discussions focused on metrics. How do we work to improve? What do the data tell us? We've also had internal planning days. These were new planning process where we had a number of different sessions over the course of the 2 years, focused on slightly different aspects of planning, different kinds of topics, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, topic, for example, and other discussions to kind of engage internal stakeholders. So they had lots of avenues to give us input, feedback, and ideas. We also conducted towards the tail end of last year a survey of all students and all employees. So there was that opportunity as well, where we specifically asked, what are your ideas on what the college needs to do? Based on this, we generated about 2,300 different ideas. There were duplicates across these. Of course, they're not all completely individual, but by analyzing the input, we could see, where do we see the common themes? What are the things that keep coming up that are important across the stakeholders? So in parallel with those input sessions, we have a strategic planning team that's been meeting roughly monthly, engaging in different aspects of planning work. So that group has reviewed key college metrics. They have conducted foresight activities, which are kind of future sessions to try and anticipate what the future may hold. They've also engaged in very traditional planning activities. So for example, institutional context, they looked at an environmental scan, they talked about strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. The key set of results that that group analyzed were the most recent results of some major student engagement surveys that we conduct roughly every 3 years. We had some of those results hot off the press around 6 months ago. So they were analyzed in detail by the planning team, as was the external environment. So we could make sure that we have a group of people at the college, which includes administrators, faculty, and staff, very deeply ingrained in thinking about the institution, where it currently is at, and where it potentially needs to go. So based on the input sessions, we identified a long list of possible priorities. There were 39 items on that list, and if you're interested in hearing more about how we developed it, I'd be happy to share that. So that list was discussed separately by both the strategic planning team and Chancellor's cabinet. So each group could go through and identify the things they consider to be the most important. Separately, and in parallel with this process, we've had a separate IT strategic planning team, and their input was also incorporated at this stage. Separately, that team had identified what they considered to be key priorities for the institution. Now, when we analyzed the results across the 3 groups, we had very strong alignment across the 3, which was very encouraging to us that we were heading in the right direction. It also ensured that we didn't have one group who kind of set themselves in a particular direction, but we had 3 completely different perspectives converging on the same possible priorities. And based on that input, we identified a shorter list of priorities for discussion at the Futures Conference. This included 4 events. So we had a community futures conference that was much reworked this time around. We changed the timeline. There was a much stronger effort around engaging with the community and increased participation at that event. And then the week after that, we had 3 internal sessions, which basically worked through the exact same content as the external event, but gave us input from both employees and students who were also invited to attend those events. So that gave us broad input, and essentially at these events, we asked attendees to rank across different ideas, which things were most important from a subset across 5 different clusters. So the strategic planning team met shortly after those events to take that input and turn that into a short list that we bring to the floor today. To start that conversation, we talked about data. Now that group has looked at data a lot during the course of the planning process. But we started that meeting talking about the institutional scorecard and how the institution is performing around a set of key metrics. So enrollment, retention, outcomes, and other measures. And this was important because we wanted to make sure when we made that final recommendation around topics to come forward for conversation today, that it was rooted in the areas that would be most valuable when we think about those critical areas of college performance. There were 3 primary areas that stood out in terms of data. The first was first term success. Now, this is a metric that we look at specifically for we look for all students, but we have a specific metric focused on our new students. So these are new students to the institution in a given fall semester, and we look to see what proportion of them experienced no success in their first term. They either failed or withdrew from every class that they signed up for. And that's a metric that has been creeping up for the institution and isn't quite where we want it to be. So that was one area that was identified as critical. Also, fall to fall retention. Now you see the data presented here as an example. You will see that we look for the VFA main cohort, which was this group of new students to the institution in a given fall. We track them from, in this case, we're looking at fall forward into fall of 25. We are up slightly for the most recent cohort compared to the previous measure for those starting in fall 23, but we didn't reach the target that the college had set for that group of students. If we split this between full-time and part-time students, you'll notice we have this red number here for our full-time students, and that's where our performance is actually a little bit worse than for the previous year. So this again is a measure that stood out as important for the strategic planning team as we were thinking about what should we do next as we think about the future of the institution to try and shift the needle meaningfully on retention. And then another area was highlighted is transfer. This is another area where the college's metrics have been dropping a little bit over recent years. And so that's another area where this is a key area for institutional focus. Now, other areas are, of course, also important, such as completion, but these are three problem areas identified during the conversation where if we can shift the needle in these, that would be really beneficial for the institution. So based on this conversation, the strategic planning team went on to identify 5 possible priorities. Those priorities were taken to Chancellor's Cabinet for leadership's review and perspectives. And based on that conversation, the Cabinet supported the themes identified by the SPT, but recommended to merge 2 of them together. So we're bringing 4 forward to the group now, originating from the strategic planning team, but based on the wealth of input we obtained through the external and internal. Now, before we talk about the priorities, just want to touch on a few considerations to have in mind as we work through this. And if you have comments and perspectives on these or other things you would add, of course, here for a conversation. First, to think about the number of priorities. The institution, if we look over time, if we go back 10 to 15 years, we used to have jam-packed strategic plans with masses of priorities. It was very difficult with that volume for the institution to make meaningful progress because efforts were spread so thin across so many different initiatives. So I'm bringing forward 4 today. The philosophy is that let's focus on a small number of priority areas and do them well, so that we don't spread our efforts too thin, get 4 years down the road and nothing has significantly changed, but really laser focus on a small number of critical areas. Also, as we go through the topics, please reflect on the relative importance of the different priorities. There could be a time, let's say we move forward with 4 priorities, it could be these, but we may not be able to do everything on all 4 of those areas as the plan progresses. So we need to know what's the most important thing to help inform decisions as we operationalize these and move forward. So we'll be seeking input on that. And balancing commitment with available resources. It would be wonderful if we had unlimited money and unlimited time, but the reality is we do not. So we need to make sure that the things we commit to are achievable with the resources that we have, so that we can use our resources in the most valuable way to support the community we serve, and not stretch our staff, our resources so thin that we can't move forward. And of course, maximizing improvements to student access, progress, and outcomes, which has been a central theme throughout this planning effort. And just to pause here, are there comments from the board on these considerations? Would you agree with these? Do you have perspectives?
Makes sense.
Okay, then I will press forward. So there are a few overarching principles. Now, these are themes that came up repeatedly during the planning process, but as we looked at them and considered it, we see these as big picture considerations that impact every possible priority. So we've separated these out. They will feature in the PAN as critical elements, but they don't individually show up as themes within the priorities themselves. Things that stood out to us here, of course, access, progress, and outcomes, the central purpose of the institution. Fiscal responsibility, ensuring that we do not commit to something that will negatively impact resources of the institution. Sustainability, and ensuring we are focusing on sustainability across the operations of the institution. And then lastly, processes, people, and technology, including artificial intelligence, to ensure our processes are optimized to give us the output that we seek to see, that our people are well trained, well supported, and ready to implement those processes. And then with the right technology in place to support those things so they can move forward seamlessly. These, as we were looking through it, we felt impacted every aspect of the college's operations. So we have separate as large umbrella items. What are the thoughts of the board?
I have a quick question, Dr. Richmond. Can you elaborate on the sustainability part? Tell me what you mean by that.
Absolutely. So sustainability, of course, has many different aspects. One of the ones that's been central for the institution for the last few years is around environmental sustainability. We had a climate action sustainability plan that was put in place a few years ago, and the college has been making efforts to move in that direction. There is a higher ed entity called the Association for the Advancement of Sustainability in Higher Education, they provide a major external standard we could look to help kind of guide as we develop a sustainability program at the institution. Now, of course, there is a trade-off between sustainability and fiscal responsibility. We could be the most sustainable college in the entire country and it would cost us a small fortune. We, of course, cannot do that, but where there are opportunities within the fiscal constraints and making sure that we are not doing things that negatively draws away from efforts to support student access, progress, and outcomes, to ensure that we are thinking about that in terms of how we do business.
I have other questions, but I don't wanna.
No, go ahead.
It's a study session.
We're studying. Well, and tell me a little bit more about what does that mean for the industries that are most relevant and more prominent in the current times, whether that's mining, optics and photonics, and aerospace and defense. Those don't always fit within the environmental sustainability component. Obviously, there are pieces to it, but there's a little bit of a contradiction to some of those industries. And I heard you say that it will be part of the principles without impacting the fiscal responsibility or the student access, progress, and outcomes. Has that been part of the conversation, though?
That has been as part of the sustainability work we've been doing at the institution. And to be transparent in some of my background, I'm a geophysicist by training. So I care about the environment and ensuring we're not being negative to the environment, but I'm also trained to go work for the oil industry. So there's an inherent conflict in there, right?
Right.
Because one is one could argue the two things can't coexist,
Right.
but really they can.
They can,
Depending on the
yeah.
kind of decisions that we make. And so the intention here is to take steps where we can to support sustainability at the institution, but being mindful of the fact that we serve the community. It's our role to meet the needs of the community, and that's really front and center. And so this isn't intended to detract or be a negative impact on that role and responsibility.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely right. This, as we talked about it, all these things are things that we think in everything we do, no matter what we prioritize, are we thinking about, of course, at the top is students, stewardship in terms of our resources, and, are there opportunities? Can things, like, I like kind of South 32s, right? They really go all in on kind of a sustainable approach to mining. And then, of course, I think in everything we're thinking about, technology's a piece of, that was an interesting conversation. Do you say, well, AI is a priority? Well, yeah, but it's a priority across kind of everything we're thinking about, really. So that was the idea of the overarching principles, but we'd love to get your feedback, A, on the list that's there that we come up with, but B, other things that you'd like to see or us to think through or take one off the list or.
I have a quick follow-up question in regards to everything. How do I ask this question? How does public policy come into play with all of these? Because I'm trying to figure out how to articulate my question. How do we implement or take into consideration public policy and the decision makers that have an influence on the access or progress or outcomes, and even the fiscal responsibility? I just wondered, is that part of the principles, is understanding the government entities that are that influence our programming and the way that we provide the sustainability aspects of these principles? Is that something that was taken into consideration at all?
Been discussed somewhat, but maybe that's a missing piece here that we should add to this list of considerations. I would say as we work on implementing this, I think this is where that will be a key component. We've had some preliminary conversations around implementation and how that might look. And it's, of course, a critical element because that shapes in part our external environment, which informs some of the strategic planning team's conversation when we're thinking about external factors impacting the college. So I would say it's a key element for us to think about as we move into implementation. And that would need to be part of the conversations.
And I asked that specifically because when we talked about, for example, the technology piece, there's different bills that are in place right now, whether or not schools are gonna be expected to have computer science as a graduating requirement. Data centers is another big conversation. And I wonder, how do we apply these principles, taking into consideration policy that is being developed as we're moving along? Are we going to move along with that trend, or are we gonna stick to, finding the balance between all? It's a beautiful convergence between all of these, but I do wonder, how does public policy play a role in this, in the conversations? Sorry, I have so many thoughts and I can't really put it together in one sentence, but I think you get what I'm trying to say.
Thank you. Other comments on this? All right, thank you very much. All right, so let's talk about the 4 priorities. I review them briefly on the slide, and then we'll go through them one by one and pause for a discussion and input from the board. So at the high level, the areas that we're focusing on to improve student success are removing barriers. This is focused on meeting the needs of students that may be unmet as they seek to pursue their education. I'll elaborate more on that in a moment. Strengthening integrated student support. This is ensuring we have a seamless journey and experience for our students, with careful handoffs from one office to another to ensure that we're ready and offering support when it's needed in a very proactive way, as opposed to students having to hunt around and trying to figure out where to go. Thirdly, creating clear structured pathways to completion. This one also includes transfer and outcomes of that type as well. And this is about ensuring that students do not take excess credits that they don't need to take, but that they have a clear pathway that meets their needs, that gets them to where they want to be. This would include, for example, part-time pathways. About 2/3 of our students are part-time, and ensuring we have pathways that meet their needs, as well as full-time students. And also thinking about working adults and their needs to ensure we have pathways that meet a variety of needs from the different kinds of students that we serve at college. And then lastly, expanding career-connected learning to make sure that our students are exposed to different kinds of careers, have the opportunity to kind of have an internship or experience careers in a meaningful way to help them both decide the route forward that's right for them, but hopefully also gain practical skills that will give them an advantage when they're out in the workforce trying to get a job. So I'll go through one by one for each. We'll stop, have a conversation. We'd love to hear from the board about whether you agree that this is a priority for the institution. Please keep in mind, once we go through these 4, I'll ask you what's missing to make sure is there anything major that needs to be added, something needs to be adjusted? And these are all drafts for the input and revision of the board.
Is there any significance to the numbering?
No, for these there is not. That's a great question. But what I will ask towards the end is, if there are priorities here you like, let's say 3 of them, meet with the interest of the board.
Oh,
Board Member Baraza?
Yes, I don't know if maybe you said this in the beginning and I lost track or I didn't hear. I kind of remember that we're finishing off an extension of the strategic plan, of a previous strategic plan. That I can't remember if it was this board or the previous board that extended it by 2 or 3 years. Aren't these plans usually for 10 years? Why is this one only until 2030?
That's a great question. So when it comes to strategic planning at the institution, we have typically planned on a 3 to 4 year time horizon. And this is primarily because the pace of change is so fast that once you get too far beyond 3 to 4 years, then the world has changed and your plan probably needs refreshing anyway. When it comes to things like master planning, so education master plan, facility master plans, those are 10-year timeline plans, because that is the amount of time really to substantively make progress on these very fundamental major changes. Examples from the master plans from before: the centers of excellence built at downtown campus and elsewhere. But our strategic plans have typically been shorter. They tend to be more nimble so that we can ensure that the plan is current is recently been vetted and we are able to pivot as needed as the landscape changes around us.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
No, this is part of a broader integrated, right? Do you want to
Yes.
elaborate on that as well?
Yes,
Which
so
maybe gets to that as well.
agreed. So we have, as part of the chancellor's goals, a development work on an integrated planning process. This is one piece of that. We consider this phase one. We are currently through the wrapping up the last master plans and the priorities identified there. This plan walks us through to 2030, at which point between now and then, we will engage with external consultants who we will bring in to conduct the master planning work around facilities, education, IT, to identify the next 10 years of major substantive change at the institution. That will take us out to 2040. Running in parallel with that, we'll have this plan covering what we term phase one, which is a development process of the next plans. And then we'll have a 5-year plan running from 2030 to 2035 and another from 2035 to 2040, which would be the associated strategic plan that pulls in the priorities from the master plans, builds in additional considerations that we need to respond to as the world is busy changing around us, all accompanied by annual reviews. So we can make sure we can pivot as needed as we.
So it's constant planning and adjustment. And also, I see your hand is raised.
But go ahead.
Go ahead.
Finish your
No,
thought.
go, you go first.
Well, I'm just wondering, just for clarification, the projects in the GO bond correspond to previous strategic plans, correct? Or facility plans and yes. So it's kind of, we're a little always behind. Would that be correct to say? In terms of facility, like from what we had planned before?
I'm not sure if I would say behind. I would say that when we did the last master planning effort around about 2015, a number of priorities were identified. They were ranked by the leadership team at that time and through the governing board. And so the point implemented the first set of priorities from there, which included, for example, the applied technology and automotive technology centers of excellence. Then as we progressed into the next, once those were wrapped up, the next set of priorities identified through that work were addressed. And now we're moving to that final chunk of projects coming out of that planning work. The challenge is more, and we can argue these were identified a few years ago, so you can see it as behind, but these tasks are very significant. We can only do so many of them at a time. And so we're kind of working our way through those sets of priorities so that we're ready once we get to 2030 to move forward with a brand new set of facilities and education.
Thank you.
What I was gonna say is, the board will get an update or actually a conclusion, I guess, a wrap up on the previous strategic plan and then the extension of that plan. The plan really wrapped up as I was coming on board, right? It was just
The original one.
the original plan. And so that board agreed to extend it. That previous board agreed to extend that plan, but you'll be getting, I think in May, right? I just saw it. We just went through a draft today of the report out. Mixed results.
We discussed our first priority.
Yes, so back to that slide when it says address things that impact learning, basically, right? Barriers. That verb is a little nondescript to me, because obviously we're not going to ever be in housing because that's a huge money investment that I don't think this community college wants to partake of. And so, you know, I get what those words mean, but it's sort of, you know, I hate to say it, sort of feels fluffy to me. And I don't know how I would reword it, to be honest. So I'm offering sort of a criticism without offering any constructive part to it. I was asked by a friend to go to health professions open house type thing, and I was all excited because I thought she meant here. And I ended up being at PMI, and she and her mom, they are super excited about it, and they signed up for a 6-month program at $51,000. And so, you know, what I would hope when we're talking about barriers is even those kind of like, why do students choose to go to PMI instead of here, since we're pennies on the dollar compared to what they're getting in those programs? So to me, this seemed a little, you know, we've always been concerned about food and, you know, so saying it's a priority unless there's teeth behind it. And, you know, I'd like to see exactly how we, as a college, we're planning on doing some of those things.
Thank you.
I have a question to follow up on that. I actually feel the opposite way. I think that it is broad, and I like the fact that it's broad, but I guess I would agree with you that the wording would be more strengthening the collaboration with entities to access to essential resources. Because we're not gonna provide food, we're not gonna provide housing. And I guess the first thing that comes to mind is programs like Job Path that partner with Pima Community College to ensure that some of these barriers are minimized or completely removed. So I actually really like this one because and all I have is anecdotal data. You have the actual data analytics. All I have is anecdotal data. And just this last week, I've spoken to 5 different people that have asked me for connection to be able to get back to Pima, because the only reason they don't go is because they don't have childcare, or because they either are gonna pay for their rent or they're gonna pay for a class at Pima. And so when I read this, it is very fresh in my mind based on the last 5 conversations I've had with people that are prospect students of Pima Community College. So I agree with you in the sense that it is fluffy and it's, I would say, broad, but I would definitely want to keep this one. Just like I said, change the wording to say the partnership, so it doesn't portray that we are going to provide those. We're not going to be eliminating those barriers ourselves, but it's going to be through partnerships. At least I'm assuming that's the intent. Okay.
I have a question. We deal with different kinds of barriers, and maybe the one I'm gonna bring up fits more into priority 2 a little bit better. But when we look at how priority 1 is written, it's very specifically like these resource barriers. But one of the barriers that we often, and we've talked about, we do have programs that address it, is just first generation students, right? The barrier of not even being able to envision going to college or what that means. And so that is a barrier. It's not necessarily a resource barrier. But I don't know if that would fit into priority 2 as written or 3 as written. It almost could fit into all of them. And I just want to know if that was a consideration.
Absolutely.
Intellectual barrier? I don't even know what do you
I
call
don't
it?
know. Yeah.
But I love that.
Yeah, and I would see that falling under, actually, you're right, it would be 2 and 3.
Okay.
2 perhaps primarily because that one's focused around support services, helping students be successful. And this would mean that for our first gen students who maybe have no experience with college, making ourselves easy to connect. And once they have, easy to migrate through. They don't have to understand the workings of higher education. We just have seamless support to help them from wherever they're starting, work through to get to wherever it is that they're seeking to get through their education. So I would definitely see first gen there. Great. Thank you.
I would, going back to what Therese, Board Member Riel and Board Member Bernal Morales said, I think this one is a massive priority unless we focus it and be more specific, maybe like just focus on one of the barriers, or because otherwise, how are we gonna measure this in 2030? Like just a little bit of every barrier we worked on, or, you know, and they're all massive barriers. So I wonder whether we should be more specific, because that one priority could be the you know,
The next 5 years.
yeah.
Michaela Hayes has her hand up. She was co-chair of the strategic planning team. Is it okay with the board if she speaks up and shares her perspective from that role on the SBT?
Yeah.
Cool. Michaela, go ahead.
Hi, I'm so sorry to add in my thoughts here. One of the things that we noted is that there's actually a lot of knowledge throughout the college in pockets. And so like adult basic ed has a lot of resources that they have cataloged, and we have advising with different resources that some of them have cataloged. We have a resource pantry. There's a lot of these pockets of information throughout the college, but it's not uniform. It's not uniformly gathered, and it's not uniformly distributed. And so our thought was along the lines of kind of cataloging it, grouping it together, and making sure that we were able to get it to students in kind of a systematic and measurable way, almost proactively instead of reactively, so that we could keep them in class. Because a lot of times we hear the students say, you know, I was doing fine in my class, but my kid's school schedule changed and I couldn't continue. Or something happened, somebody got sick and I couldn't continue. But if we had these systematic ways of students to find these resources, we could potentially help them stay engaged in the courses. So that was kind of the conversation level that we were at. I don't know if that helps with the conversation a little bit.
Thank you. Other thoughts from the board on this one? Would you like to see it move forward? Would you like to see it as a priority in a reword form? Do you, would you prefer to see it more focused on a particular area of barriers? Or
I really liked what, board member, well, everybody said basically, that maybe just dialing in a little bit to make it a little bit more specific. I liked, Carla, what you said about, I forget what you said, but I liked it.
Collaboration between the
Yes,
partners that provide the essential service resources. Access. to.
because I think that kind of goes to, we're not going to necessarily be providing the housing and the food, right? But there are, I mean, Pima County, City of Tucson, nonprofits, there's so many groups out there that provide these resources. And really all we have to do is have people here at the college who know who to talk to when a unique situation comes up. And board member Baral Morales, having done that work for a long
17 years.
17 years, knows that relationships are everything. And knowing where the resources are and knowing the name of the people who have the resources. So I think that language signals a lot, and it's just such a minor change. But I hate to be like picky, but I think just that small change really kind of dials it in.
I do have a criticism now.
Uh-oh.
I'm a people person, so I'm for all of this personally, right? But I think a college priority for us to, you know, make sure we know who is doing the work out there. To me, it seems like a couple of staff people's jobs and not necessarily a college priority. I think some of the things that Michaela had mentioned, you know, the fact that, you know, there's a ARC, I think it's a food pantry on the downtown campus, but none of the other campuses have the same kind of operation. You know, is it because we don't have the staff on the, you know, so I think to me, this doesn't sound like a priority, like a top, one of our top prior, I mean, it sounds so weird because that's so important what we're talking about. But to say that we're trying to make these connections with other people because they are doing the work, that sounds like a very odd priority to me.
Can I push back on that a little
Sure.
bit? Because I see what you're
Yeah.
saying, because you're saying, well, all the college would have to do is have 4 navigators, and these people are the people who have to know all these. But if we're talking about a larger priority, it might be something larger than that. So if I'm one of your students and I don't show up to a bunch of classes and you reach out to me and I'm like, you know, I had to pick up some extra shifts at work because I couldn't, you know, afford my groceries this week. You don't have to be the one to navigate the world of helping me, you know, figure that situation out. But under this banner, under this priority, you might be informed by the, like how to get them to the right people that do. So if priority one is just a philosophy, like an umbrella that we have over the entire college, then it kind of touches each of us in some way, not necessarily having to be the people that literally, you know, walk these people to a shelter or something.
And all I'm gonna say is, you know, having taught for 35 years, faculty do that all the time.
Oh,
and
I
we
know,
always have,
right.
yeah. So, you know, so it just seems like if it's something that's already, they do it all the time, you know,
Could it
I've.
be improved though?
Of
Could
course.
faculty have more resources to help students or better phone numbers or cards to hand out
So-
or?
So that was why that address, that word, that verb, to me, it's not, you know, I just think it's not enough, you know? Yeah, completely agree with what you said. Yeah, and faculty have been doing it forever, you know?
Oh, I
I
didn't
don't-
like make it
yeah,
up, like
Right,
obviously.
yeah, you know, I've heard of faculty taking people's cars and getting them fixed because they can't get back and forth. And
Can I also push back a little bit? I think that I understand where you're coming from, and I do think that, because that was actually my follow-up question. How will we do this? If this is a priority, how will we do this? I have 101 ideas because I was a social worker, but, and that was actually one of my criticisms about the college when I was a student. But I think
What was one of your?
the lack of not knowing where to go for help.
Okay.
As a single mom, working 2 jobs and going to night school to
I had
try
a
to get my
similar
degree.
experience.
Yeah, I had no idea that that's something that the college, I didn't think that the college cared. All I knew that I was a number in a classroom for a teacher that had to teach me stuff for me to graduate, to get a piece of paper that says that I was educated. That's all I knew. So, but to me, we're in the business of people.
sure.
And if these people cannot be here because they have these barriers, I think this is fundamental. So for me, it is very much a college philosophy that should be a priority. For me, it is. And I'm speaking both as a former student, as a social worker, and as somebody that still serves in a capacity where people feel the comfort level to come and ask me for help. I just see the potential for this, minimizing some of the challenges and then increasing the student success, increasing the graduation rates, increasing so many different aspects that are data-driven. So for me, it is.
So as a follow-up to what you just said, so I agree, how do we do this? And then how do we measure whether we've made progress on it or not?
Well, the how will actually be a follow-up step in this. Right now, the goal through the plan is to identify what are the strategic areas we need to focus as an institution. Development of the way in which we will achieve these goals is, you could argue, partly in process. Those 2,300 ideas generated give us concrete ideas coming in from stakeholders about how we would do this. But the way we see operationalizing the strategic plan is to connect this directly into the development of the next chancellor's goals. And that the chancellor's goals will be the operationalizing piece. So of course would come back to the board, so you would see what those major initiatives would be to implement these strategic directions. And that would then cascade down to the cabinet members' goals. So this would become an operating plan embedded through the institution, cascading from the strategic plan through the goals and onwards. And similarly, from a measurement perspective, there are a few survey instruments, for example, we can look to when we gather input. As an example, we conduct a barrier survey each fall semester, where we look at students who applied to the institution but did not start taking classes. And we reach out to understand what prevented them from coming to the institution. So we have input there. Oftentimes those reasons relate around financial need and family issues, things like that. We can track that year to year to see whether things are changing. And through the goal setting process, the chancellor's goals and cabinet goals, establish KPIs attached to those, which again, as part of his goals would come to the board for approval. That would be how we would identify the tactics we would use and the specific measures that we would use.
So I like this one a lot in terms of the essence of what it's trying to do. There might be some way to tweak the wording or whatever, and I'm not as concerned about that. But I think the idea that we would establish as a priority for the institution, that we would address these social barriers that prevent our students from succeeding is critical to what we do. I mean, if I do like a comparison to healthcare, so this would be social determinants of health, social drivers of health, health-related social needs. There's lots of words for it in healthcare. And most of the research around what drives individual health outcomes, it's 80% of it is that. So you could get the best care from the best hospital, the best doctor, whatever it is, and at best, that's driving 20% of what your health outcomes are going to be. And I don't know that it's quite that. I haven't seen it in terms of academic performance, but I would suspect that it's similarly influential. So if we, and I'm not saying anyone's suggesting this, but I'm just saying if we only focus on sort of what traditionally we do as an institution of higher learning, we will be selling short what our students need, especially I think in this community, in order for them to be successful. And also, I mean, I'll walk a little farther out and say that I'm not sure that I mean, there's a lot that can be done through partnerships. And, I've talked about that over the years. We've had those conversations too about the college can partner more with community-based organizations that address some of these issues. But I'm also not ready to fully walk away from the things that college can do directly. I mean, we do have a model for a food bank. We have a model for a childcare program. We have a model for now understanding like there's lots of critical questions there, right? Like where does the money come from? How do we and those things we can address on the line, but I don't see anything wrong with us taking a stand as an institution and saying, look, figuring out how we're going to help our students get through these barriers is a priority for us as an institution, and we can figure out on a need by need, on an item by item basis how we're going to do that. The only thought on the wording that I would add is I know this list includes lots of things, right? It says food, housing, and others. So I know that's not meant to be only those things, but if we're calling them out, I feel like childcare is a critical one to mention by name, just because we're already starting to do some of that work. But even on something like housing, and I agree, I'm not quite ready to jump into the deep end of the pool that we need to like build dorms or whatever, but at one of the ACCT conferences, one of the presentations I was at was from, I think, a college in the Pacific Northwest that had partnered with a nonprofit, and the nonprofit built and runs all of their student housing. It's only students, but the college doesn't own it. They don't maintain it. They don't do anything. They just have a relationship with this community-based housing organization that runs all their student housing. So I think there's ways that we can, through partnerships, through things like that, can try to address some of these things without us having to like build dorms. And I think we can be creative, but I do like sort of taking a stand in our priorities and saying, this is something we are going to address, and then figure out how to measure it as we go forward. The only thought I kept occurring in my head is, and maybe it's just a nod to wanting it to be a priority, but also recognizing that our core business is education, is maybe not having it be number one, like maybe having it be somewhere lower on the list, so that like a core academic one was number one. I know that's not necessarily a reflection of like priorities within priorities, but maybe if it wasn't the first one out the gate, that it wouldn't catch people kind of going, okay. Again, not that I don't think it's important, but I think maybe that would make sense to have like the core academic ones be the first ones on the list, and then that one be on there as a priority, but maybe not the first one.
Can you share with the board at some point? I'm not sure if it's Dr. Nassi or information from Nick, but it'd be interesting to know how many of our students are positively impacted by the childcare at the Desert Vista campus, and what the cost is to the college for that, because it's in the millions, I'm thinking. And I'm a huge advocate, just like you. I was always a single mom. I never had any other support, and it was working at Pima, you know, sometimes my ability to take jobs was compromised because I had a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old, you know, and they're not going to be able to get home by themselves. So, but like that, childcare at each campus, to me, that is like amazing. And so that's what I'm saying about all of these. They all could be amazing, but if we just say we're addressing it, it doesn't seem like, you know, having a food, you know, we don't even offer food at most campuses anymore, you know, and so that means that if you're stuck there all day, like some of our students in the
Adult base again.
well, but I was also thinking the health professions,
Oh.
you know, they go, I think they do 9 to 5 oftentimes. And if there's no ability to get food and you didn't have a chance to grocery shop, I mean, I know that come on, but those kind of things happen, right? So all of these are super important, but just to address them, to me, if we're not gonna, you know, be making significant positive changes, I'm glad it's not gonna be number one because, you know, that it feels like, it feels, anyway.
Yeah, on the childcare, so on the 27th, we're having a study session where they're gonna go through all the childcare.
Great minds think alike.
And well, we thought we might put it together with this one, and we were like, oh, it's gonna be too long, so that's gonna be separate. And we wanna say it's around. So we do 2 ways, right? We do kind of a C campus style where we pay for people's childcare. And then we have the in-house at Desert Vista.
Yeah.
And I wanna say, and they just gave me the draft presentation, I can't remember, it's around 50 families, I believe, and we use a variety of resources to help pay for it, but they're gonna go through all of that.
Yep.
But this is exactly, it's funny, I'm sitting here, this is exactly the conversation we need is, do you agree, just strategically, is this something we should prioritize, the idea of helping students with these, if you will, social, non-cognitive, whatever you want to describe those kind of needs for it? Is this something we prioritize? And it's been a healthy debate throughout. That's mimicked some of the conversation here, is why I'm smiling. So it's great to hear the feedback from the board.
And I would just like to posit, you know, I'm not saying we should do this, but if we raised, you know, standards that only wealthy kids could go here, only kids who had taken college algebra at a minimum, but preferably Calc 1, you know, if the standards were raised, a lot of those basic needs are going to be met because they are fortunate enough to be in that socioeconomic. We aren't that kind of institution. We're an open enrollment. So I would say that most of our students have these kind of basic needs. And even though they are addressed, I don't think it's really ever been done in a strategic way at the college.
Yeah, way that we're really, at least maybe there are measurable outcomes somewhere, but I think that's a key takeaway for me, and I think you've heard from a lot of other people too. Like if we're gonna address food security, for example, in the student, you gotta, how many students are food insecure now? How do we change that number over? I don't know if I've ever seen numbers like that. I mean, I'm glad we have programs like the pantry and things like that, because I think you're right. I think we intuitively know a lot of these students have these issues, but I don't really know like what
I
percentage.
mean, all of it is important, right? Childcare, do you have childcare needs? How many times this last week have you gone without a meal when you were hungry? Transportation, can you not take all of the classes that you wanted to take this semester because you couldn't get to the different campuses since they weren't all offered at the one closest to you or whatever? And I don't think we know that about our students.
If we do a campus climate survey,
We have a variety of surveys that go out at different times. So the student engagement surveys are actually one of our major assessments of the perceptions of the students across a variety of different topics. There are some other more focused surveys that we do also, some external instruments, some fully internal. The first step we would need if this moves forward as a plan priority is to go through those surveys to see what do we currently know. Where are there gaps that we need to fill in terms of understanding the student population, and then use that to put an instrument into place that we maybe repeat once a year, monitor how things are doing. So some of this we do have insights for, some of it relates to grants that the college has had before, where we we have specific metrics on a population of students. But I would say there's an opportunity here to improve our understanding of the needs of our students and then match them with those services or expand our own, whatever that might look like, to help make a difference on what's probably arguably the population we can most impact as a community college and change the lives of those people who maybe can't come today, but maybe with the work that we do, they will be able to, and then change their employment situation and really work to transform lives as we talk about doing it the purpose of the college.
I'd also add too, just by way of a piece of advice, as we're sort of figuring out what that outcomes measurement looks like, it also, I would caution not to make it overly simplistic. Like it can't be as simple as like, I'm just making up numbers, but like 39% of our students today are food insecure. We need to get that number down or improve, because there's external factors that we can't control. Like if we just hit like with some kind of giant economic downturn and this like tsunami of hunger, like there's nothing we can do. Like at some point it'll be, we just get overwhelmed by that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to address those needs, but I'm just saying it's not as simple as like 5 years from now, is that number higher or lower? Because it also has to be sort of filtered through like the larger context of what's happening in the community and the economy and those sorts of things, so that we would, if that number went down, that would be great. I mean, we'd love to see that, but even if it doesn't necessarily mean that we weren't successful as an institution in helping to meet some of those needs, because it could have just gotten so bad that there was no amount that we could have done to be able to hit what we wanted to do. So
Absolutely, that context is key, and maybe it's more focusing on what college is offering and making available and tracking what we do control, as opposed to finding ourselves attempting to measure something where it's heavily impacted by things that we can't control for. 100% is a great comment. Thank you. Do we move to the next one? Okay. All right, so next up, priority 2. This one is about streamlining integrated student support. So improve coordination across advising, tutoring, academics, and student services, so students experience a seamless network of guidance and assistance. So this is all about making sure that we have easy connection points for the students when they first start with us, be they first generation or otherwise, and then having a smooth and seamless experience for that student. So they get entered into the institution, they have a handoff from one area to another as they journey through their time with the college, that we are proactive with support. So it mentions tutoring here, but these are kind of example areas, really the full breadth of services we provide. So for example, if we see are connected to the data piece within my team, if we are tracking the metrics and we see that there are students struggling partway through a semester, how do we use that data to support that student success? Maybe working with faculty, there's a recommended route. If students are failing a certain number of assignments, perhaps we connect them with the tutoring center, and this just happens. We connect them, we use the data, we use faculty and student experience expertise to make sure we're building a supportive network that helps every student and what they need as they journey through their time at the college. Of course, we have some of this now. It's not like everything is all disconnected, but the feeling through the planning conversations is that we can do better. We can take this to the next level.
Quick question, I go back to the campus climate survey. Do we have data about rating on advising, tutoring, or academics or student services?
I believe we do. I believe there are point of contact surveys that are done through student experience, whether they get that input on the satisfaction of people's experiences with that.
It'd be interesting because you said improve the coordination, and I think you mean for that seamless transition, but I wonder if we start with just improvement, period, and then proceed to improving the coordination. Because I think that might be an area where I think we could also be better. It's just the quality of the advising and the tutoring, maybe not so much the academics. I don't know. I'm really intrigued as to what those ratings are like.
I can access some of those data, share them with the Chancellor's Office for distribution to the board. Share.
And the other thing would be interesting is, I know that they do keep track of students who go into the tutoring centers. I ran one and organized it when we first changed it. And we kept track of people who went to tutoring. If they went to tutoring twice, their chances of getting a better grade was increased. And if you went 5 times a semester, so there are statistics that show that if, and right, you have a question, you don't understand something, you ask, you get some help, your success improves greatly. And originally it waffled back and forth with advising and testing, right? As far as coming into college, there was required advising. And then this is a college, one of the chancellors says, we don't need to treat these children like babies. They don't need advising. So we went away from that. And, they do, I think the data shows that if you have required mandatory advising when you first start out, you just someone to help you along the way, right? So all of those kind of things. This one and number 2, as you well know, Dr. Richmond, we've been talking about these things for 25, 35 years at the college, right? Student support has always been an area that, needed improvement because students complained it wasn't working for them. And the same thing with the pathways. We've been talking about pathways for at least, I'm gonna say 20 years. And that the fact that we still are talking about it is sort of, maybe it wasn't a priority before.
Since I kind of already made my priority to comment in the wrong section. I guess I would love to see something here that captures what I was talking about earlier. And I don't know if it's the word outreach or what would be a stronger word for, recruiting. But I would just like to see that kind of captured in this one, since it is part of this priority.
Can you elaborate a little bit? So outreach, like engagement, can you?
Well, when we were talking earlier about barriers and one of the barriers, not a resource barrier, is that psychological barrier for students who can't imagine being a college student.
You can't be what you can't see.
Right.
So if Pima's not at the high schools, at the elementary schools.
Yeah.
That's not an option for them.
And it's going to even be worse now that trio isn't part of our repertoire, right? That was the way we were getting all of that done for a lot of students.
I agree too, that I do think the piece that was, I wasn't thinking specifically about necessarily first generation students, although I think that's a really good point, but after I read this, I wondered, doesn't like the student experience start at the recruitment and outreach stage? Because this sounds like it's after that, the way that it's written right now, that it's like, once you're here, we need to make sure we have this whole thing. But I really think it's from the first time we make contact with you through the time that you graduate. And so
That's why we have those CRMs.
Yeah, exactly. So I wonder if there's a way, and maybe it wasn't like intentionally left off, but maybe there's a way to make it more explicit in that wording to say from, improve coordination across, I don't know, outreach and recruitment, advising, tutoring, academics, like from the beginning through. So it's a seamless sort of support experience from sort of pre-student to when you become a student, and then go through to the end.
And then just because we're taking this all back and we want to, I'm kind of hearing you say though, it's not really the coordination, it's the actual experience from beginning, like through that pipeline. Am I, no?
I agree. I think it's the experience. The coordination, I think, could use some help, but
That would be part of it.
that would be part of it. That would come organically if the system in place already was strong and supportive.
Yeah, you could say like improve the student experience across, and that you kind of use that phrasing at the end, but move that into the beginning, and then just to kind of rephrase it a little bit so you think about. Because it all should, that seamless coordination is part of what creates the experience, but it's not just about coordination, it's about creating the experience. That's the outcome. The other, and similar to that, mindset. And again, I wasn't thinking about first generation students, but I agree with what you said, you know, and I don't know that necessarily has to be reflected in the wording here, but it just was a thought that popped into my head, so I'd share it. But one of my frustrations as a student and watching my kids, so I don't know if it's genetic or whatever it is, but like I just flat out will never ask for help. I just won't. I'll figure it out on my own, even if it takes me 5 times as long as it did to like try to figure out how to muddle my way through. So I always look for like some proactive identification. Like if someone came to me and said, "Can I help you?" I would say yes, but I'm never going to come to you and say, "I need help. Can you help me?" So like I don't know how that proactive identification works, but I think there's a similar thematic element, I think, to the first generation question about like you have to get to them to as opposed to waiting for them to come to you. Or if you're just stubborn, I guess, or whatever my genetics are that make me want to do it on my own.
Stubbornness can be a barrier.
Yes,
also.
exactly. But that, and you talked about a little bit about, you know, trying to identify which students might need it. But I think at least if I was that student, the key would be like, don't wait for me to come to you. Like you need to come to me and try to pull me into whatever you're doing, because I'm never going to come knock on the tutor's door and say, "Hey, I need help with this." I will spend hours being frustrated trying to figure it out. Love that. Good feedback.
Ready for the next one? Yeah. Comments? Okay.
Just one quick note, asterisk. How do I say this? Ensuring that it's an actual contact and not necessarily left to artificial intelligence to do. Because I think that going back to what you said, we have to go look for them. Again, I will go with anecdotal data. My sons, both of them came here and they both have cognitive disabilities. And I stood and watched the whole experience. And both times they said, "There's a computer right there. You can look it up right there." That isn't acceptable. And I didn't say anything. They needed to figure that out on their own. But you cannot just depend on the computers to provide the information, especially if you have individuals that are coming to ask for help. We need to make sure that we provide that support, a human being, not just depend on a computer or artificial intelligence to do it.
And you know, Carla just did, I completely agree with you. My little sister from Big Brothers Big Sisters wanted to come here. And we went over there and they said that, and we both looked at the computer, and a student advisor did come over. I taught here, I'd only been gone for 5 years, you know, and so I didn't lose all of my content knowledge. By the end of his description, both she and I were like, what the heck? You know,
Yeah.
he told us about, you know, D2L, and there's another, I can't even remember all the names, but like fiber, and it was
Overwhelming, I'm
such-
sure.
and I'd already experienced all of it. I'd been using it, you know, teaching with it. So I agree with you that we can't just expect people, because even when there's that human contact, it's also sometimes very overwhelming. Yeah.
Great, good input, thank you. All right, priority 3. All right, so this one is all focused around pathways to completion. Ensure students have well-defined guided pathways to completion and transfer with the flexibility needed to balance college with work, family, and life commitments. So this is about, I touched on this before, making sure we have pathways to our different completion points and transfer points that ensure students don't take classes that they don't need. So they're not spending their money on credits that are not needed, that aren't going to transfer or won't contribute towards or count towards their final certificate. And to make sure that we don't have only full-time pathways, but pathways for our part-time learners, working learners, to make sure, and there's always going to be unique circumstances, right? But for the broad types of students who come here, to make sure that they have an easy route to get from A to B without doing things they don't need to do, that is clearly laid out, it's easy to understand, then supported by the seamless student experience that we were just talking about in the previous priority, to make sure from an academic perspective, it's easy for students once they come to college.
So Dr. Richmond, how many of our programs do not have pathways that are well-defined and laid out? Because I thought we'd been working on this for more than a decade.
We have, I would need to check the
Okay,
exact
but
figures.
I mean, I don't I don't need to know a exact number, but I mean, we've been working on this for a long time. Do we have many, a few? What would you say?
I think it's many, but I'm not sure
Okay.
if they're set up for part-time students, working
Okay.
students. I think it's that diversity of pathway,
Yeah.
which is really. Because for sure, a lot of work has been done on this before. Guided Pathways is featured in previous strategic plans.
Yeah.
Of course, Guided Pathways is broader than just the academic sequence of classes. There's much more involved.
Yeah. So a guided pathway is not that you have to take these classes in this order on these dates. A guided pathway, like you're saying, it's if it's a part-time student and they can't take 5 classes a semester, you still need to take these classes in this order, but this is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Absolutely,
Okay.
yes.
I have to be really honest and say, I love this priority. I think it's important. I'm not crazy about the sentence that describes it because what you're saying, what this priority is intending, is not what I'm reading, and maybe it's just me. This one seems very fluff to me. Because I think it's ensure students have a well-defined guided pathways to completion and transfer with the flexibility needed and diversity to balance college and competing commitments, which I know it could be work and family, but I don't know why for me, the work and family seems the fluff part, and I know that it exists, so I sound almost contradicting to what I said earlier. There's something about that sentence that doesn't say to me,
It's like trying to accomplish 2 things in one sentence.
yeah,
Yeah.
okay, I'm glad I'm not crazy.
No, I didn't pick up on it, and then when you mentioned it, I was like, yeah, because it's almost like 2 ideas, like
Mhm.
we can help you balance college, or we can help you. And I see what they're trying to do by smoothing them
Right.
together. But when I first read it, I actually finish your thought and then I'll.
No, that's really just my thought that I agree with it. I think it should be a priority. I just don't think that that statement truly defines what it's intending to, at least not for me. It doesn't.
Unless we're misinterpreting.
Right.
What the intent is. So I mean, I'll say what I think the intent was or what my thoughts were when I read it and maybe y'all will let me know if I'm wrong. But when I read it, I'm thinking about well-defined guided pathways for completion. It's really that first part of the sentence that stands out, because from my own experience, helping my son, I think there is a well-defined way to get from starting to completion, except that sometimes it's confusing and folks who are in the position to try to assist a student, they're kind of confused about the process. And I'll bring up the radiology technician program. You have to have your prerequisites, so there's certain classes you need to take. Then you can apply, and that's only open twice a year. It's open for like a month. You have to have a certain amount of points to be admitted into the program. But some of the classes for the prerequisites are only offered once per year. So because there's all these competing deadlines, you could end up deciding, I would like to do this program, and you won't be able to enter it for a year and a half because of just the way things don't line up. So it's almost like it's confusing.
Mhm.
And so that's what I was thinking when I first read this, creating clear structured pathways to completion. That's the title of priority 3. So that's why I was kind of thinking that. I was like, oh, great. And my question was going to be more like, what does that entail? Does that entail sitting down to each program and deciding how we can make more points of entry or how we can ensure that, it's more straightforward. But then board member Brown Morales brought up that second part of the sentence, which I can see how it relates, but it almost seems to be a completely
Separate
different.
concept.
Right.
Yeah.
So to tag on to what you just said, if you don't mind,
No.
when I was at PMI, one of the things that they said was that, unlike Pima Community College, we don't have all of these courses that you have to take to get into the program. We have all of these courses that you take during the program, and we guarantee you, it says second semester, we guarantee you there will be that class for you to take. So since that, I mean, it was really a horrific experience to be sitting there to hear all this stuff, because we cancel classes at Pima. And so one thing about the guided pathways that I would like to see, I've always thought of guided pathways as these are the courses you need to take to get the certificate, right? That's what it
List,
is.
check off, check off, check off,
Right.
right? That's
But-
exactly what I envisioned.
But what I
They
think
actually have it.
they
Yeah.
do, yeah, but what I think we need to make sure we do at Pima College is when our departments and programs are developing what money they need for the next year, they need to say, we're gonna have these classes and they're gonna run no matter what. Because if you have 12 students in a class and then 3 drop and you have 9 and it gets canceled, that means there are 9 students that will most likely never get to where they need to be.
9 other people's academic career has been impacted.
Right. And so I would like to, see if we can move our, how we plan and how we fund. If we say, this is your pathway, and it needs to be for everything. I don't think it's fair just to say we're only gonna do it for one program. I think we need to do it for all of our, if we're offering the degree, you should be able to get the class in this timeline. And if it's our fault,
But I think that's where the difference is in the 50,000, because that's ambitious to want to expect that we're gonna be able to do that without having the financial impact. Because if you're right, if we have a class of 12, and let's say 6 of them cancel, is it financially, what's the word? Feasible,
Yeah.
thank you, to have a class of 6 students. And yes, we're gonna impact their academic career, but just the financial impact that would have, and that's why probably PMI. And the thing is that they work a lot with just get student loans and just go ahead and pay this $50,000. And I know that firsthand. So finding the balance between those two,
Yeah.
I
But it
think
could
is.
be like flexibility. So for instance, some of these classes that my son needed to take, I don't see why some of them maybe could have been if he had been admitted into the program. It's like, all right, we're gonna issue you a waiver, let's say, you do have to take it within your first year. Or it's
I
up
hear
to
what you're saying, yeah.
people smarter than me to figure that out. But I hear what you're saying about, we have to also make sure it's financially feasible to do this as well.
Mhm.
So on this priority, I heard language, right? So you're saying kind of cut off after transfer, basically, right? You want just a clean idea. And that idea should include limited access programs, which is, I think we were talking about, right? And all of those things. I will tell you one of the genesis, I would say, one of the ideas here, right, was why do people come to the college? They want a degree in rad tech, right? They want to go to U of A. They want to get, most of the students want a certificate or degree and go on to do something. And the data point that, of course, you've heard me talk about a lot, right, is the completion. And so the idea is as a priority, we need to prioritize in getting more people what they want in those degrees or certificates. And especially as we look across other community colleges with challenging, lots of first generation students and lots of diversity in their community and lots of low socioeconomics who are doing better than we are. So we feel like we can, the idea was to prioritize getting people through. Throughput was kind of the idea here.
I think the priority says that. I just don't think that the description of it says that.
Yeah. And you all have focused on the end there, right? Kind of. The flexibility needed to balance, like that part is what you.
Yeah, Yeah, that definitely is a separate concept, or I think it's in there, it's part of it, but it's not necessarily clearly stated to align, to make it look like it aligns with the actual priority.
So. Recent, Nicole? No.
I'm not saying this as a statement of disagreement, just as my perspective, which I don't have a problem with the way it's written. It makes sense to me, but I appreciate everybody's feedback.
How do you know you're a boy? Just kidding.
Ready for the next one? All right, so the fourth priority is expanding career-connected learning. So it provides students with career exposure through internships, work-based learning, employer partnerships, and applied learning experiences.
That's perfect.
I know, I was just gonna say, I'm like.
Perfect. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
I love it.
Wow, you ended on an easy one.
So that's,
Making me talk.
yeah, so I'm thinking this is workforce development because people who are in a transfer program, right? There may or may not be, you know, internships, work-based learning, all of that kind of stuff, because, you know, like engineering degrees, I don't think that there are internships until you have enough knowledge and learning to be able to have you be an intern. You know what I'm saying? So this is mostly just workforce type strategies.
You want me to go? You go.
Anyway,
Yeah.
No, the idea was that we believe that work-based learning experiences, even if you're pre-engineering, have great value. We feel like for all students, and if you go to universities, like, you know, those internships they're giving in the freshman year, you know, no matter what you're studying. So we feel like the idea of getting students some form of work-based learning across, even in transfer is still career. Some level of what, and we don't know how yet. Is it a capstone course? Do you go job shadow an engineer maybe for a little part of your class? But we weren't just thinking specific to her. We were definitely thinking broadly across the college as a priority. That one thing's really important for Pima students is that we provide them with some work-based learning experience.
So I'm not against the idea. I think it's great. This sort of reminds me of priority one in that we're not going to actually be doing anything except for making those make those networks and those relationships with people out in the community.
That'll be a part of it, right?
Yeah.
That's the how, yeah.
Because I mean, if we don't have those relationships, just like, I mean, just to go earlier on, like the outreach and those two words that Greg had mentioned earlier. You know, if we're not in the high schools, if Pima's not doing it, it's not going to happen. And so I think this is a great idea, and I think along with, yeah.
good, thank you. So there are a couple.
Isla has her hand raised.
Yeah. Go
ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add, one of the conversations that we had regarding these learning experiences was that connecting students generally with things that interest them in the future in their career could help with our persistence numbers. We have things like our biology faculty teaching undergraduate research projects, and we have things where they're involved in upper division research that they might go on to continue to study. So it's a little bit like what board member Randall was talking about with the idea of if they can't see themselves in it, they're not going to know, but for the next level up. So as they come in, then giving them the opportunity to see what this degree could do, and providing kind of a structure around that we could help with that. It might be within advising, it might be within certain classes, within honors, within different places and different degrees. But if they're going to graduate with a liberal arts degree, and associates in liberal arts. We need to help them imagine where they want to go with that and make sure that they're on the right path. So that was what we were envisioning. So yes, workforce, but also the bigger, more nebulous degrees that don't have a specific application.
Michaela, I really appreciate that because I was thinking after in the summer between my freshman and sophomore year in college, I was going to school for environmental studies. And obviously it's a transfer program. I went to university afterwards. But I had an internship that the college helped me get at the New York State Department of Health. And I learned that I actually really liked working for the government and doing that kind of work. And I had never envisioned that before. And that internship, I think it really changed my life. I didn't ever go back to working for the Department of Health, but I definitely went back to working for government. So I appreciate that.
I had the opposite, if that makes you feel any better. I did an internship with the Phoenix Police Department Crime Lab and discovered I really didn't want to be a CSI, and I continued on to be a teacher. So it can work both ways. And I really enjoyed my internship, but not enough to want to work in that field. It was a very eye-opening experience.
That's a valuable experience.
Yeah.
It was
no sense
very
going through
valuable.
4 years or whatever
Right.
it takes to, I do not want to do that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, great. So there are two related topics that we wanted to make sure we discuss today. Firstly, what's missing? What would you want to see in the priorities for the institution that you have so far?
I feel like I want to ask for extension. Like, do I have to answer that today? Because I feel like I've thought about so many things. And I'm not saying that there is anything missing, but can we have an extension like by Friday? I don't know. Or do you have
You
to?
can answer that question anytime.
I do appreciate that you're narrowing it down so that if everything's a priority, then we don't have any.
Right.
So I appreciate that there's not 20 of these.
Great, thank you. And that's been very intentional to we ourselves and make substantial improvements in the area so we can really transform the student experience in the college. And actually the other point we wanted to gather info on is related to that. We've had positive input with wordsmith and adjustment across the full topic. How would the board like us to see us prioritize across these four? At the moment, the ordering is somewhat random how they were developed through the planning process. We would like to switch that to a very intentional order to help us make decisions as we move forward about where do we prioritize if we have to make choices along the road. And so we have the barriers, integrated services, the seamless pathways, and we have the career connected experiences. Where does the board see the prioritization across those?
You have
School. I guess you are.
You have 5 board members. You're probably gonna get 5 different lists. Mine. The first 2 could be flipped. I don't really mind, but mine is 3, 2, 4, and 1 in that order.
Mine also exactly the same order.
That's actually.
I
what we
have-
had,
Seriously?
that exact order, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I have a different order, but with 3, the top one.
All right,
Tell it to us.
3, 2, 4, 1.
Oh, 3, 4, 2, 1.
Oh, that's pretty close.
Yeah. I'd be okay with either of those.
What was it? 3, 4?
2, 1. But I'm okay with just as long as 3's number. The 3 is the number 1.
3, 2, 4, 1.
Not enough numbers.
Good, excellent, thank you very much. And so just to touch on this measure of success, we mentioned this in part as we went along. We have the institutional scorecard. We will be looking to that, shifting the needle in a significant way through the strategic plan on major metrics there. And as already discussed for implementation, we see annual goals being developed as part of the chancellor's goals. so that there is visibility with the governing board to see what the major implementation activities will be, what the key performance indicators will be attached to those on an annual basis as we move through the plan.
So ideally, just on timeline, if the board approved the strategic priorities, the strategic priorities in June, that in August, when we came back, right, you'd be seeing chancellor's goals aligned to those strategic priorities
Great.
very clearly, right? Like,
Yeah.
And cabinet goals for that matter, so kind of cascade down.
The next steps at this point, we'll take the input from the board. Thank you all so much for your input and guidance as we kind of fine tune, shape this. We will take any additional feedback that the board provides and weave this in as well. We will take this forward through the strategic planning team, through Chancellor's Cabinet for an additional final conversation before it's brought forward to the board in June. And we will also, as we finalize the language, tighten this up, have the final input from the board and anything additional, post the priorities publicly and provide a link so that community members, employees and students can provide feedback if they would like to, so that we can take that into account before the very final priorities are brought to the board. And we have a timeline of either May or June, depending on the timing of how that moves. But certainly no later than June, bring this forward to the board for action at one of the regular evening meetings.
I just have one question about the SPT and the cabinet. Is there any overlap other than you on those two groups?
There's one, Marcy Euler serves as part of the strategic planning team and is also
Okay.
cabinet.
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Or for the next meeting, could we have a list, just so that we know who's on the,
Absolutely. Yes, I'll make sure that's available.
Thank you so much.
This was all.
And I'll-
Yeah, this is really great.
This
And
is one of my
also,
favorite.
this has made a huge difference.
Huge difference.
Yeah.
I
major?
just have, have
Yeah.
one comment. This was nerve-wracking to me because
What are you looking at?
The graph?
It
I know,
wasn't,
yeah.
it wasn't, no matter if you blew it up or not, it was illegible.
Ah.
So it was sort of like I love numbers and I love that. And I was like, dang it, I can't even tell, but just FYI.
Next time I can include the
Thank
link.
you.
This is a copy from the public. I can make sure that link is there for us.
Yeah, this has been my favorite study session.
Yeah, this is really good.
We've reached number 3, which is adjournment. So we'll adjourn.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, team. Nestor. Good job, man.
You on the 8th, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, happy
Thank you.
birthday. Yesterday.
Happy birthday.
No, Saturday.
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 No me invitó a la carne asada.
I went hiking.
Even better, you should definitely invite me then.
I saw your pictures going up Timamook.
That was the coolest thing. My sons, that's what they wanted to do, go for a hike. I'm like, done.